Chapter 1. The Mythology of Science. On the surface, a myth is the illusion of an age or a culture whereby life and its origin are interpreted. As such, the myth has an axiomatic truth to the age and its criterion for judging and assessing reality. But much more is involved in the concept of myth. A myth is the attempt of a culture to overcome history, to negate the forces and ravages of time, and to make the universe amenable and subject to man. The myth reveals a hatred of history. History shows movement in terms of forces beyond man and in judgment over man. History rides heavily over man, is inescapably ethical, shows a continuing conflict between good and evil, and clearly reveals man as the actor, not the playwright and director. And this man hates. To fill a role he never wrote, to enter on stage at a time not of his choosing, this man resents. The purpose man then sets for himself in his myths is to end history, to make man the absolute governor by decreeing an end to the movement that is history. Where his myths acknowledge man's lot in history, man ascribes his sorry role not to his depravity, but to jealousy of the gods. The goal of the myth, ever more clearly enunciated over time, has become the destruction of history and the enthronement of man as the new governor of the universe. The means used by man to accomplish the goal of his myth is magic. The purpose of magic is the total control by man over man, nature, and the supernatural. Whatever the form magic takes, this is its goal. The relationship of magic is therefore basically to science rather than to biblical religion. Under the influence of Christianity, science escaped the constraints of magic. The purpose of science gradually ceased to be an attempt to play God and became rather the exercise of dominion over the earth under God. The redeemed Christian is God's vicegerent over the earth, and science is one of man's tools in establishing and furthering that dominion. For science to overstep that rule is to forsake science for magic. The purpose of modern science are increasingly those of magic, the exercise of total control. The essential goal of modern science is knowledge in order to have prediction, planning, and control. Thus, magic has again triumphed, and modern science is popular precisely because man today, wedded again to the world of myth, demands magic to overcome history, to eliminate the ethical struggle, and to place man beyond good and evil and beyond judgment. On the whole, modern science has taken readily to this new role, and it is enjoying its status as magician in the mind of modern man. Science has become magic, and it is governed by myth. Basic to God's nature as sovereign is his omnipotence. It is not only an assertion of the Bible, but also a basic presupposition of every age that all things are possible with God, and with him nothing is impossible. It is not surprising that man, having succumbed to the lure of myth and believing himself to be his own God, should proceed on the premise that all things are possible with man, scientific man. The examples of this faith are many and striking. The world of history condemns the sun to death. The sun was created, and therefore the sun can die. It is not eternal, nor any does it have self-regenerative power enabling it to revive itself at will. The sun has a history. It moves in terms of a predetermined and predestined plan, not its own. The sun, like the entire universe, and man included, belongs to the world of history. It must die. But man, the mythmaker, wants a world refashioned according to his own imagination, created by his own word. History must therefore either be arrested or, having run its course, be recreated by the new God, the new great magician, scientific man. Thus, Kenneth Ewer, a specialist in planetary astronomy and a Fellow of Britain's Royal Astronomical Society, has written in discussing the death of the sun, quote, "Still another possibility would be to construct our own sun, a source of heat and light which might be suspended in the sky and hold the hovering demon of cold and darkness at bay. This artificial sun would operate by subatomic energy. In the remaining years of grace, man might learn how to run the carbon cycle. Hydrogen, the fuel, is abundant, and other light atoms such as lithium are also plentiful sources of energy. With several billions of years of time at his disposal for research, man should be able to develop cheap, abundant, and manageable subatomic power. End quote. If 50 billion years is too long to wait, we can be comforted by the headline writer who informs us that a great future is reasonably close. Quote, "Workless world foreseen by scientist," end quote. Dr. Glenn T. Seaborg, atomic scientist who heads the United States Atomic Energy Commission, spoke of the new world being created by science. Quote, "These systems promise us a way of life that is entirely different from anything man has ever imagined. Up to now, work, labour, employment, or simply occupation has been a central notion of human existence. There always have been a few people who live well doing nothing, but the idea of almost an entire civilization living well with essentially no one physically working is almost inconceivable to us." End quote. Quote, "Fortunately," end quote, Dr. Seaborg adds, "this time is not yet here, because, as one of the new gods and judges, he feels most men are not ready for paradise. In God's paradise man worked, but there was no curse on his work." Seaborg also protects himself by virtually denying his statement, quote, "All that may change in a, quote, workless world," end quote, "is our definition or connotation of the word work," end quote. Such statements by Seaborg as well as by Hewer are read with simple faith by the members of modern society. They believe in the mythology of science, are self-consciously asserting that they are in the vanguard of a new renaissance. Dr. Cheryl P. Haskins, president of the Carnegie Institution of Washington and a member of the Yale Corporation, has written, quote, "It may be no accident that the emergence of science in its modern form occurred contemporaneously with the Renaissance revolution in political thought and action. And it is that heritage of which the philosophy and methods, not primarily the practical results of American science, must be an important guardian in our nation today." End quote. Haskins sees science as possessing an unusual role in the development and formation of the future. Quote, "Indeed, a striking characteristic of the body of scientific knowledge is the degree to which, in organization and growth, it recalls a developing organism, or, on a larger scale, an evolving population of organisms. Like the society that supports it, the body of science is, in something more than a purely allegorical sense, a living thing." End quote. If, quote, "the body of science is, in something more than a purely allegorical sense, a living thing," end quote, what is this new, quote, "living thing," end quote, which now shapes man in the future, the new God of the universe? Another scientist, Dr. Franklin Murphy, Chancellor of the University of California at Los Angeles, believes that we are now witnessing, quote, "the return of Renaissance man," end quote, as a result of, quote, "the scientific revolution," end quote. However, he regards it as, quote, "more of a revolution than a renaissance because it has very few roots in the past, unlike the Italian Renaissance. It's mainly pointed toward the present and the future. It has few historical benchmarks," end quote. The evidences of this revolution are many. The arts reveal it clearly in the willingness of man to, quote, "cast aside his prejudices in terms of what his ears and eyes have been accustomed to hearing and seeing, and begin to examine the arts, himself and his society, with the same degree of freedom which he has given in the past to chemistry and physics. The arts cannot remain immune to the tremendous revolutionary ferment generated by the scientific revolution." End quote. Dr. Murphy saw, quote, "three major inputs," end quote, behind this new renaissance or revolution. Quote, "I see three major inputs. First is the death of Calvinism, that set of traditions which said that to live richly in one's emotional life is a dishonorable thing for a man to do. Secondly, the impact of the scientific revolution. It's shaking up everybody's confidence that there are any timeless verities. It's leading to an acceptance of experimentation. That's almost the name of the current game. The third input is the growth of a new open-mindedness, a willingness to look candidly at the old prejudices which we find today in our entire society. All of this is producing what you may call a Renaissance man, what some have called a, quote, man for many seasons, end quote. Of course, he is not being born without a certain amount of friction. People are having a hard time understanding, for instance, the reluctance of the Supreme Court to restrict freedom of expression by rigid definitions of what is, quote, obscenity, end quote. The court is doing no more than respecting the principles of free speech as written into the US Constitution, end quote. Dr. Murphy's three, quote, inputs, end quote, are basically one, and this statement lacks honesty. Calvinism never held that, quote, to live richly in one's emotional life is a dishonourable thing for a man to do, end quote. On the contrary, this attitude in America came with Unitarianism and Transcendentalism, both anti-Calvinistic movements. Calvinism is a term Murphy uses as a euphemism for an evasion of the reality of biblical Christianity, for it would be more open and controversial to ascribe this, quote, dishonourable, end quote, attitude to Christianity. For Murphy, Calvinism means the idea of any absolute supernatural law of God. His second, quote, input, end quote, says the same thing, quote, timeless verities, end quote, absolute truth, a real right and wrong, good and evil have been dropped in favour of, quote, the current game, experimentation, end quote. Murphy's, quote, third input, end quote, is man's willingness to accept this scientific revolution against God. There is, therefore, for Murphy, a, quote, renaissance, end quote, a, quote, rebirth, end quote, of man, because there is no longer a moral and religious law over man. Man, scientific man, has become his own God. The use of the term Renaissance is thus significant, even with the qualifications. The Renaissance revived pagan humanism. Man again became his own ultimate. Man was the measure of all things, and thus his own law and God. As a result, because there no higher law was recognized, the state became totalitarian, and the Renaissance and the 20th century's scientific revolution are the two great periods of totalitarianism in the post-Roman world. The moral consequences of the Renaissance were relativism and aesthetic individualism. The only law binding man was his own taste. For the Renaissance perspective, quote, good and bad are not absolute concepts, but products of their time. Good is what conforms to its time, what corresponds to actual society. In other words, good usage. Bad is what is out of date, the antiquated, end quote. The goal of the Renaissance was to strip man of the bondage of law and leave him free to sin as he pleased, subject only to his own taste, to personal aesthetics. This, too, is Murphy's goal. It is not so much a particular scientific breakthrough in botany, physics, chemistry, or something else. It is to free man from law, God's law in the name of science, the new area of the gods or man-gods. The mythology of science is the old myth offered to Eve, quote, ye shall be as God, knowing, that is, determining for yourself, good and evil, end quote, Genesis 3:5. This new mythology of science is therefore hostile to the old fact of God. Somehow God and his world must be disproved. Somehow, too, the evolutionary scheme must be proved. Life on other planets is no mere matter of curiosity with these men. It is a religious hope. When reports indicated that, quote, the surface of Venus has temperatures ranging from 675 degrees Fahrenheit at the equator to 300 degrees Fahrenheit at the poles, end quote, we are told that, quote, lingering hopes that Venus might support life received a new blow, end quote. Now, this is curious language for supposedly objective science. Supposedly, quote, science, end quote, and scientists are interested in the results, not in proving a hope, in getting at the truth of something, not in making a case. The pleasure should have been in getting some kind of knowledge about Venus, but the knowledge was a, quote, blow, end quote, to, quote, lingering hopes, end quote. But this is not all. The same issue of Science Digest carried this sad report on Mariner's Force photos under the title, quote, Obituary of a Planet, end quote. The unhappy story began, quote, Mars is dead, geologically but not biologically. When the analysis committee saw the clear photos that came in later, they were, quote, shocked really beyond belief, end quote, and the speculation was confirmed, end quote. However, the committee did not entirely give up hope. They stated that, quote, the Mariner photos neither demonstrate nor preclude the possible existence of life on Mars, end quote. Mars is geologically dead, but hope for biological life is not surrendered, and recent speculations have revived the hope. Scientific objectivity and impartiality? On the contrary, this is a passionate dedication by the new magicians to the myths of their own making. The scientists believe themselves, modestly, to be the new gods of the universe. Alan Smith asks humbly in one article, quote, can we improve on nature too much? End quote. He states that, quote, there is no law, natural or otherwise, that says nature cannot be duplicated through the use of other materials, and without drawing the idea out any further, it's sufficient to say that any good camera lens is optically superior to the eye, end quote. Automation and cybernetics are an indication of the possibilities for the future, quote, it's also well within the bounds of future possibility to build a highly complex machine whenever the situation demands, end quote. The optimism of science is boundless. Having declared that scientists will create a new sun, it is nothing for them to plan the creation of life. A famous biochemist has said, quote, this century will go down in history as the century when life ceased to be a mystery. Life is only chemistry. It is complicated, yes, but we no longer have any reason to believe it is beyond human understanding, end quote. There is, of course, no trace of humility in this statement, but it is absurd for gods to be humble. Humility belongs to men. A British scientist has stated, quote, I feel certain that in another decade or two we ourselves will be able to create life. I no longer find it necessary to believe in God, end quote. Of these scientists, Gunther writes with assurance, quote, they have found the key to life, end quote. This, then, is the new mythology of man, the mythology of science. It expresses the basic presuppositions of the humanism of the day so that its absurdities, contradictions, and pretensions have the ring of infallible truth rather than irrational myth. The magicians of every age have been imposing, and their prestige is great. Their accomplishments have often been, whether in Egypt, Babylon, or in the modern world, very real. But their foundations are untenable, and their future one of collapse as the myth breaks on the rocks of reality.